My Let's Not Meet encounter took place earlier this week in a beach town in Central Florida. This is my first and hopefully last story here. I surf. It's a big part of my life, and if I go a few days without getting in the water, I go through withdrawals. In the last year, my work schedule has changed so that I'm working a lot of late evenings. I usually get home around 4 a.m. I live on the beach and have gotten myself into a routine of coming home, grabbing a bowl of cereal, and then getting my board and heading to the beach around 4:30 a.m. It's still dark at this time, but most nights the moonlight and the glow from the pier is enough to illuminate the waves. I will usually surf for a couple of hours, catch the sunrise, then head back home to sleep. Most days the beach is empty for the first hour or so, with the exception of the occasional jogger. Monday starts off with the usual routine. I usually stay close to the pier, but the rip current was strong, and on days like that, I just drift with the current until I hit a point about a half-mile down from the pier. I use a particular house light as a marker. Then I paddle back into the shore and walk back to my starting point. As I was waiting for the next set, I noticed the outline of someone standing on the shore watching me. I couldn't really make out any details, just that there was indeed a person there. I really didn't think twice about it, as it's not uncommon for people to stop and watch for a few minutes. I continued surfing and put him out of my mind. Approximately 45 minutes later, the current has pulled me out to my marker, and I start to paddle into shore. It's then that I noticed what I think is the same person from earlier, still lingering, which is odd because I have been out there a while and drifted a fair distance. He apparently followed along the whole time on the shore. I reach the shore, throw a quick glance in his direction. He's a husky white male around 40-ish, wearing some shorts, and a ratty-looking red 49ers shirt from what I could see. He's about 15 feet behind in the shadows, and I started walking briskly back up the beach towards the pier and my beach access ramp. The guy follows along, always keeping the same distance, even though I speed up and slow down a few times, just to see how he reacts. Nothing is said, but it's clear he's following me at this point. I get to the beach access ramp, turn around, and he's gone. He must have ducked behind one of the hotel stairwells, is all I can think, but I wasn't going to go look for him, and so I just chalked it up to one of those local homeless, or eccentrics, the area attracts, and didn't really give it any more thought. End of the story, right? Not exactly. Fast forward to the next morning. It's overcast and a little darker out. I'm in my routine, and I'm back on the beach about 4:45 a.m. The swells are light, and I'm close to the pier, just floating as there is no rip current this day. I start to get that you are being watched feeling, and I can't seem to shake it. Looking around, the beach and pier are deserted, except I notice what looks like a lone fisherman standing above me on the pier, but can't really make out any of his details as he is backlit, and I can only see his outline. I don't notice a pole, and he seems to be just standing there. I get into a wave, and as I glance back, it looks like the guy threw something into the water at that moment. I didn't think anything of it until a few minutes later. I glance back, and it appears he just tossed something else into the water. As soon as I look in his direction, he stops what he's doing and just stands there motionless. So now I'm curious what he's up to. The sky is lightening up a bit, and the next set of waves roll through. This time, as I start to paddle into the wave I'm watching him over my shoulder. As soon as it looks like my attention is elsewhere, the man tosses in several more objects, yet stops as soon as I'm turned back towards him. It finally dawns on me what he's doing. He's chumming the water by tossing chunks of meat into the sea around me. You chum to attract fish. The bigger pieces you use, the bigger fish you attract, and these were not small. This guy has no fishing gear with him and is attempting to attract sharks right to where I am, in the dark water maybe 150 yards offshore. I'm instantly a mix of fear and anger. I start paddling hard but steadily into shore, and then he drops all pretense and dumps an entire bucket over the side of the pier while starting to walk back towards the shore end. As I get out of the water, I start to move towards the pier stairwell, intent on confronting him. I'm no punk, and this guy just put me into a dangerous situation. He's coming down the pier in my direction as well, and this is when I finally get a decent look at the guy. He appears a little heavyset, and he's wearing a red shirt, a red 49ers shirt. He's the same guy from the day before. At this moment, a strong feeling comes over me that I need to get out of there instead of escalating the situation further. I'm not the toughest guy on the block, but I've had my fair share of scraps and generally don't shy away from confrontation, but something inside me felt very, very wrong. I changed directions and began walking towards the beach access ramp and home. He comes down the stairs and continues to follow me at about a 10-foot distance. The only sounds are the waves crashing on the shore as we play out our low-speed pursuit across the sand. I get to the beach ramp and start to go up. Now this ramp has a 90-degree turn about halfway that leads to a 30 or so yard long walkway between two condo buildings to access the beach street. Once I hit the 90-degree turn and I'm out of his immediate line of sight, I book it in double time to the far end of the walkway, putting some distance between us. I'm still going back and forth in my head if I should confront him or follow my gut and walk away. I stop and wait at the far end of the walkway as he turns the corner at the 90-degree bend and just stops. We just stare at each other in silence. After what felt like ages, but was probably all of 20 seconds, he reaches into his waistband and draws out what I take to be a fillet knife. I can see its reflection in the light. He waves to me with the other hand, lets out a short, sharp laugh, and quickly spins on his heels, disappearing back down the ramp and out of sight. I decided I had had enough, and taking a slightly roundabout route to make sure he wasn't tailing me still, I headed home. I haven't seen him since, but I also haven't been back to the beach in a few days. So to the guy who tried to turn me into shark bait, let's not meet again. This is a story about the most disturbing thing that ever happened to me while delivering pizzas in high school. There are a few others, but this one stands out above the rest. I was 16 years old and just got my license, so I needed a job to pay for a car. A few of my good friends were working at a local pizza place in town, close to my house, so I decided to apply and I got the job without having to interview because they were so short-staffed. They also hired me as a delivery driver without even checking to see if I had a driver's license or not. I did, but I always thought that was funny. About a month or two later, we were having a really busy night. I was sent off to a delivery in a fairly nice part of town, the next city over. This was before GPS was common and not very reliable, so we still used maps to locate houses. This particular house was in a new development, so it wasn't listed in any of our directories, but my boss thought he knew where it was and gave me directions. He was way off, so I had to call the house for directions, and this is where things got weird. The conversation on the phone was normal. I told the man I was near his house, but needed directions because the ones I was given weren't accurate. He was very understanding and told me how to get there from the road I was on. A few minutes later, I pull into his driveway and instantly got a bad feeling. He was a man in his early 50s to 60 and was standing in the middle of the driveway with a creepy, satisfied smile on his face and wearing a maroon silk bathrobe. I got out of my car and gave him his 10-inch Hawaiian pizza, which cost $10.95 at the time. He gave me a $20 bill and told me to keep the change, considering I was late on the delivery and had to call the customer for directions. I wasn't expecting anything for a tip, let alone almost $10. I drove away from the delivery thinking that something was off, but I got a great tip, so I was happy. I lit up a smoke and turned up my radio when I felt my phone vibrate. It was a number from the house I was just at. I got nervous thinking it was going to be a complaint or something, because why else would someone call the delivery guy after he has delivered your food? My blood curdled at the words that came out of his mouth. "Do you want to come back over and get the knife?" he said. or at least that is what I heard. I said nothing and hung up the phone and drove back to work as fast as I could. I also called one of my friends who was working there at the time and told him what happened. On the 5-minute ride back to work, he called me at least 3 or 4 more times. For some reason, I actually answered one of the calls, and he asked me if I wanted to come back after I got off work to spend the night. I was greeted at work by laughter from pretty much everyone working that night. Everyone thought I was either faking or overreacting. Then I got another call on my phone from the same guy. I showed my manager while the phone was ringing and let it go to voicemail. That's when he decided to call the restaurant. Once this happened, my manager realized this was probably a serious situation and answered the phone pretending to be me. He had a very short conversation with the guy, and at the end told him he's not allowed to do business with us anymore and that we were blocking his number. When my boss hung up the phone, his face was pure white and looked like he could barely comprehend what had just happened. I asked what the guy said, but my boss would not repeat the words that came out of his mouth. I was so paranoid that I had to stay with a friend that night instead of going home. Guess who called me a couple hours later? Yeah, he called. At least 10 times. For at least a week or two, I was living in fear of being kidnapped. I was always looking at people or cars that were around me, and I was paranoid that I was being watched or followed. It's possible that I was right because I started getting phone calls again. This is when I decided it was time to call the cops and put an end to this. I explained everything to the officer, and he assured me that he would take care of the situation. Turns out the cop did nothing. I live in a low-crime town of less than 20,000 people. This guy didn't have anything else to do that day except write some speeding tickets during the afternoon, then some DWIs in the evening. The calls kept coming, and my paranoia grew. This needed to stop, so I told my boss that things hadn't improved, and he called the cops himself. An officer came down to the restaurant and took down our statements. Unlike the other officer, this man seemed visibly shaken and angered by the events that had happened. He promised me that he would personally handle the situation, and then I didn't have to worry anymore. This police officer followed up on what he said, and I never heard from that creep again. I kept that same job for about 3 years, and had nothing but great times there. However, creepy silk bathrobe fuckface, go fuck yourself, and let's not meet again, alright? So I'm really freaked out right now. A little background. I'm in my late 30s, and I live in a home with my brother who works in personal security, and my fiance. I always feel really safe because my brother is home at nights, and he's armed to the teeth, and we have a pit bull who's very protective of us. So my brother recently took a temporary high-clearance security job in Arizona, so is being put up in a hotel out there. Before he left, he showed my fiancé Rob and I how to operate one of his guns, just in case. We live in one of the safest towns in America. Nothing bad really happens. It's like Mayberry, but with all the recent clown BS and the increase of drugs, it's better to be safe than sorry. So this begins 2 nights ago. My fiancé goes to bed early because he has to be up by 5 o'clock most mornings for work. So my fiancé and I were in bed with our dog, and I have my headphones on because I'm always watching something on my tablet. Just an FYI, I snore bad, so my poor fiancé wears earplugs. Around 11:30, my dog jolts out of a sound sleep and starts growling. She goes over to the window in our bedroom and starts growling louder, so I got up to check. I look outside and there's a man staring at me. He's skinny and old, grizzled gray hair, unkempt beard, vacant eyes. He looks at me and smiles, and I about lost it. Now my dog is straight up foaming at the mouth and barking. This finally wakes up my fiancé, and he comes over to see what's going on. The man sees I'm not alone and takes off. We called the cops. They show up and start looking around. They find the guy's backpack. He has a notebook with my name, my address, and a diagram of my fucking house. They find beef jerky, sleeping pills, I guess from my dog, scissors, twine, electrical tape, condoms, and a rusted knife. They told me that they will be on the lookout for him, but I'm really freaked out. So, old man, let's never meet again.